over Zoom. And we want to continue our discussion about the practice of meditation, or the practice of, I prefer to use the term awareness, but the practice of what we normally call meditation are specific practices to eventually arrive at something we might call awareness. This is something we'll talk more about because usually the meditation they talk about mindfulness and meditation, or they talk about concentration, but awareness is actually a result of practicing mindfulness and concentration or meditation. So meditation in general is an umbrella term. Within that, a specific training of the mind in concentration and in mindfulness. And of course, the teachings of meditation, especially the way we're following it here, and it comes from the teachings of the Buddha. And actually, I just was chanting Namo Buddhaya. So, Namo Buddhaya in homage to the Buddha. And as I explained last night, there are two levels or meanings of the word Buddha. One is the external Buddha, or the historical Buddha who lived and attained enlightenment 2,500 years ago and taught the Dhamma. But the Buddha, so most people regard Buddha as this person, but actually the Buddha himself has said on many occasions, one doesn't see the Buddha by looking at this body. He said, whoever sees the Dhamma sees the Buddha. And whoever sees the Buddha sees the Dhamma. So actually the Buddha and the Dhamma are not two separate things. But then what is the Dhamma? Now Dhamma is a very loaded word. It means basically everything in existence is a Dhamma. But to keep it simple, basically, the Dhamma is the teachings of the Buddha. And so people say, what did the Buddha teach? And he said, I taught the Dhamma. But okay, then what is the Dhamma? Or which came first, the Buddha or the Dhamma? The chicken or the egg? The Buddha himself has said that he only rediscovered the ancient truths, or the ancient path. That is not something that the Buddha invented, but he simply rediscovered the ancient truths that, became kind of hidden or disappeared or laid over with many other layers of ideologies and philosophies and so on. But anyway, so, but the Buddha's teaching is centered around the Four Noble Truths. Truth of suffering, the cause of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Because it's the common experience of every living being basically is people are desiring to live in happiness and to be free from suffering. Would anybody disagree with that? But then people's idea of what happiness is different. And even though people say that they are desiring to live in a state of happiness, find happiness, but in fact, when you look at the way they live, they're doing the very things that bring them unhappiness. So it sounds like a contradiction. People say they want to be happy, but in fact, the things that they do make them unhappy because they haven't understood what is the real meaning of happiness. So this is where the Buddha played his important role, was to try to, that's what he discovered basically. He discovered the underlying source of what you call real happiness, as opposed to just the sensory happiness. But anyway, it's a very deep subject. But basically, the practices of meditation are the way in which we can look into ourselves to really discover the truth about our own mind. And the word meditation comes from the root. Of course, meditation is an English word that's translated from the Pali teachings of bhavana. So bhavana is an umbrella term in the Buddhist tradition to mean various kinds of meditation. And bhavana means to grow certain wholesome qualities in the mind, to grow the mind in wholesome qualities. So there's different types of meditation, but basically they have one form and one aspect in common, and that is, keeping the mind focused on a particular object in order to still all of the neurotic and active states of consciousness. But basically it means, the word MEDI means to keep the mind in the middle. Because the MEDI, the root word comes from the root of medicine or media or mediation. All of those terms denote something that's in the middle between the opposites. So in the practice of meditation, we're trying to keep the mind in the middle of the opposites. So the mind is always going between one extreme or another, the various poles, you might say. And what are the two extremes? One extreme is the mind dwelling in the past, remembering the past, pining for the past, wanting to create the past, and so on, that cannot be recreated. Or it's projecting into the future, hoping that things will change and things will come, trying to plan out the future. But oftentimes, despite all of our best intentions and plannings and trying to control things, the future doesn't come out in the way we might want it due to impermanence. So anyway, that the first extreme is the mind being caught between the past and the future. And all problems are problems of the past and the future. try to think of any problem that you have and see if it's not connected to the past or the future, one way or another. Come on, give me 5 seconds, I think, quickly. Anybody come up with something? Any problem that's not connected with the past or future? And basically that it means that we're because we're not grounded in the present moment. And the mind basically knows nothing about the present moment. Even though people say, oh, you know, be here now and live in the present moment, most people just have a very kind of cursory or a very limited understanding of what dwelling in the present moment actually means. So anyway, those keeping the mind in the middle between those extremes. The past is one extreme, the pleasant is the other, the future is the other extreme. So the Buddha said, in avoiding those two extremes, he takes the doctrine of the middle path. That means keeping the mind in the present moment with mindfulness, living with mindfulness. And mindfulness basically means keeping the mind grounded and centered in the present moment so we can clearly see the things that are coming through our body and mind that are trying to pull us to the past or the future with either worrying, fearing, desire, greed, and so on. Most people are, you know, their minds are constantly moving between the past and the future. And the other two extremes are pleasure and pain. Either people are going after pleasurable feeling or they're trying to avoid and push away unpleasant feeling. And those also cannot be really satisfied, even though we try to create or do things to bring us pleasure. Sure, we get pleasure often, but it's very short-lived because we're basing our pleasure on something that's also impermanent and something we can't control. Let's say you have a special friend or something else and you get pleasure, being with them. But for one reason or other, they might start to change their mind about you or other things, or you yourself might wind up changing your mind. And those objects may no longer bring you pleasure. Or it's the same way with a young child. They grow up, a young child play with certain kind of toys, right? In a certain age group. And then they grow out of that and they lose their interest in those kind of toys. And they search for other toys or ways of bringing satisfaction. So, and like that, people's lives, they go through the whole life like that because of the nature of impermanence. So the vacillating or going between searching out pleasurable feelings or trying to struggle to get away from unpleasant feelings, those are the other two extremes. So keeping the mind in the middle means developing equanimity and developing contentment. And then there's the third level of sort of the two extremes is myself and the other. It means we're preoccupied with myself or narcissistic viewpoints. As certain politicians, we can see very clearly, they're so consumed with themselves, causing suffering to so many other people. Or you're obsessed with somebody else, trying to control somebody else. And also that cannot be satisfied. So anyway, those three sort of dualities are what most people's life are continually moving back and forth between those three dualities. And they're trying to control those dualities, but or control those objects or ideas, but because of impermanence and changing conditions, we might be able to control something for a very short period of time or manage something, but in the end, we lose that. Ultimately, we can't control it. Like even our own bodies, right? We might do a lot to preserve our good looks or our energy and by all kind of various things, but in the end, we can't control old age or death, especially. So many people think they're going to live to be of a certain age, and they're dead within a week or the next day by so many causes and conditions because they can't be controlled. Anyway, so these all of these different things, this due to impermanence. So this is what the Buddha actually wanted us to understand. Because if you're investing your life and investing all of your energy and time into finding happiness, don't you think it should be invested in a wise way? Like if you invest your money in the stock market, you just give your money to some stockbroker because he has a good name or reputation or something like that, you might lose all your money. So in the same way, is in following the Dhamma, we're investing our money, so to speak, in the Buddha, or in the Buddha's way of approaching the idea of happiness. And so that's where the practice of meditation comes from. But of course, it doesn't include only meditation, but it includes a whole way of viewing life and the way that we live our life from day to day too. But that should be lived through the practice of mindfulness. So basically, coming back to the word awareness. Awareness, or the way that I like to define the term awareness, is just the state of being in the present moment. The mind resting in the present moment in a state of alertness, but without any particular object. It's just resting in the present moment. And the present moment is a vibration of our consciousness. And that's what most people know nothing about. And usually our consciousness, is dominated by the sense of ourself, me or I, what we call I, me, or mine. And so everything that we do, you get up in the morning, I have to go to work. Where's my shoes? Give it to me, give it to me. Throughout the day, even though we may not actually say those words, it's the momentum behind in our consciousness that is dominated by that I, me, and mine. And so that is what is I like to define as being consciousness, as opposed to awareness. And awareness is a state of consciousness, but without so much of I, me, or mind behind it. It's a much larger space. And again, most people know nothing about it because no one's ever bothered teaching us about it. But awareness is the natural state of consciousness, or it's the state subtler than consciousness. And it's basically the present moment. Most of consciousness is connected with the past and the future. It's connected with those three dualities. So the awareness is that state of being, or present moment, being in the present moment, which is the natural vibration of the consciousness. And that's what we are ultimately training our mind or working towards in the practice of meditation, keeping the mind in the middle again, using that definition of keeping the mind in the middle, rather than meditating just on some object, keeping the mind in the middle. And even as another duality, the body and mind are two dualities. Some people are totally engrossed in their body and neglect their mind. And other people are lost in their mind and not grounded in their body, not grounded in reality. So being lost in the mind or lost in the body are also the two extremes. So in the practice of meditation, actually you're being in the middle. You're not lost in the body and you're not lost in the mind. You're sitting in between them, knowing how they each function and how they each are affecting our consciousness, and resting in that balance. And that is really what we're ultimately working toward, to directly experience that state of awareness. Because the body and mind were born together. At the time of conception, when you were conceived in a womb, the mother and father provided, the X and Y chromosomes, the material ingredients that produced that one cell organism. But the spark of consciousness, sort of like a spark, it come from another dimension. That spark of the consciousness, like in your car engine, a spark plug. You might have the gasoline there, but if it doesn't have a spark, it's not going to start your car. So the spark is the consciousness or the life force. And it comes together at that time of conception to give that, the aliveness to the body. And that one cell organism, in the space of 9 months, a one cell organism through cell division and all that, I think basic biology, went from a one cell organism to multi-billion cell, 8 or 9 pound baby, with billions, or even I think they're saying now trillions of cells in the space of 9 months. And that consciousness with cell division awareness was going into each of those new cells. So essentially, every cell of the body has awareness. I'm using awareness in the sense of kind of just like pure energy. And basically they were, together. the body and mind were growing together. It means the mind was, awareness was in every cell. And so when the baby is born, basically, its mind is still in that sense of awareness. And it's the present moment awareness. And grounded in the body, because that's all the baby knew for 9 months, was just this energy creating this material body. And then the baby is born. For the 6 months of its life, its awareness is still basically in the present moment. But then as it starts to learn language and people start giving it things, its memory from the past gradually starts to resurface. And then, it starts to get attracted to things outside of it. And also gets attracted to pleasurable feelings and painful feelings. So I usually give the example of for a baby, all the relatives come over to see it, and they give it a name, and the relatives come over and gucci gucci goo, call it its name, and over a period of time it starts to turn its head when they call a name. It looks. In the beginning, it didn't do that. Any of you mothers out there, when you named a baby, in the first couple of days, did it look at you when you called the name? Yes? No. But maybe after 6 months or so, that, yeah. And then the sweet grandmother comes by and gives the baby its first chocolate, first sweet. It tastes that sweetness on the tongue and it smiles because it brings a pleasurable feeling. And then maybe the uncle picks up the baby and squeezes it a little bit too tightly and gives it a kind of a painful feeling, and it, pulls back. And when that is experienced several times in a row, the baby starts to associate the face of the grandmother with a pleasurable feeling. And the face of the uncle or the father or whoever else might have been with a painful feeling or a neutral feeling. And then the baby starts hoping that that particular face connected with a pleasurable feeling comes again. And hoping that the face that caused it a painful feeling doesn't come again. Or the face that just produced a neutral feeling had an indifference to it. But this is the critical juncture when the baby loses its present state of awareness and the past and the future is born in the mind. So the past and the future basically are mental states that basically we've allowed to be created, although no really fault of our own, really. But that's how the past and the future has been born. And then it's born on the premise of pleasurable and painful feeling. That's really, the important thing to understand. And that we're wanting pleasurable feeling in the future and wanting to get away from painful feeling that we have now and to keep it away in the future. And if you really check up in your life, maybe you can't remember back to when you were a baby, but even going back 6 months, 1 year, or so on, if you just remember all the things you did and see if it wasn't connected with wanting to get some pleasurable feeling in the future or get away from a painful feeling. Anybody think they notice any of that phenomenon in their life? Shake your head, yes or no. Okay. So, coming back to this idea that, all the, basically problems and suffering boil down to problems of the past and the future. And having lost that connection to the present moment. And so the present moment was our original state of awareness. But because of desire and aversion and focusing outwardly, we've lost that connection to the present moment. And that's what I, sometimes when we use want to draw parallels with, sort of Christian ideology or Christian thinking. That Adam and Eve were kicked out of the kingdom of heaven because of desire. Just thought I would mention that because this is the Christmas time and so on. But it has a very interesting parallel. That the original source of suffering is the disconnection between the mind and body, or the disconnection between losing that present state of awareness and then getting caught in the past and the future. And of course, as the child grows up, and we've all grown up, that the mind has become more and more deeply enmeshed in the past and the future, simply because there's no alternative, or no one has ever told us a different way of thinking. In other words, don't lose that connection with the body. So basically, the body is the gateway to the mind, because again, the mind is in the cell. The cell is our body, where awareness resides. What we call our mind is basically just a sum total of all those vibrations of awareness and reactions and so on that have accumulated in the memory, the cellular memory in the brain, and so on. So how do we, gradually, reconnect with that state of present moment awareness that's deep inside, or in that deepest level of the nervous system. And that's basically what the practice of mindfulness is. And the whole of the Buddhist teaching is directed at learning how to sort of go back inside and reconnect with our natural mind, with the natural state of awareness, which can be done, and in which a person can still basically function. And so the Buddhist teaching about mindfulness is outlined in the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and it starts with the body. Mindfulness of the body. Because again, the Buddha understood that we reach the mind through the body. And it's our mind that creates all of our suffering. Our mind is creating this, desires for the future, and a fear of the past. And also thinking that, being sort of addicted to the external world. Thinking that happiness depends on what you can bring in from the outside. So we're trying to get things from the outside and somehow bring them to us. Whether you're going to eat some food, now it goes in and creates pleasurable feeling in your taste for about 5 seconds or so, and then it's gone. Or trying to push away unpleasant sounds or body sensations or even our thoughts. So our mind is constantly going back and forth between trying to create pleasurable feelings and to avoid the painful feelings, because it lost that connection in the middle. So it has nowhere to stand. His whole life is dependent on, or caught up in this tug of war between satisfying pleasure and to stay away from pain. But it's a dead-end street. It's a futile endeavor because of impermanence. So when the mind is resting in the middle without the thoughts of the past and the future, then the mind has its natural contentment. So, and also, usually it's, when people say they have desire, they want something, that pleasurable feeling is dependent upon a certain object. And so we think a certain object is bringing us the pleasurable feeling. But actually, it's the idea of what that object will bring, or because of a painful feeling, we want to substitute it with a pleasurable feeling. So what we want is pleasurable feeling. The object is just a means of satisfying the pleasurable feeling. And the same with the painful feeling. We want to get rid of the painful feeling, so we think it's the object that we want to get rid of. But those feelings keep coming back with new and different objects. So anyway, this is important aspect of understanding the mind. So anyway, basically, the root problem with our existence, or in our life, if we're not satisfied with our life, or we're still caught up in so many types of habits and addictions and phobias and obsessions, or just unhappiness. Maybe we're bored, we're unhappy, we're depressed. But all these things can be traced back ultimately to the sense of self, the sense of I. And even the sense of I was born, in the baby. And was born with this identification to the past and the future. It's kind of hard to understand, but the baby doesn't have a sense of I yet in it when it's born. So where does it come from? You give it a name. Does the I reside in the name? or the object that you give it. But that sense of I came from losing that connection to the body and focusing outward. Because when you're focusing outwardly, like you see something you want, and you're going toward it, at that time you're not in the body. You're not grounded in the body. The mind is basically focused on an object that it wants, or an object that it wants to get away from, which then you get lost in your mind. So let's say you're embroiled in a lot of thoughts of anger. You see, now that's one extreme, getting lost in your mind. And the other extreme would be getting lost in the body, worrying and suffering from various pains or so on that might be going on in the body. So again, those are the two extremes. So the practice of mindfulness is, the practice of keeping the mind in the middle. And basically that starts with getting re-grounded in the body, because our mind operates through this body. And so if we're not grounded in the body, we won't be able to see our mind, because the mind, our thoughts are coming up from a deep level of awareness. And that disconnect with the body is also the cause of all accidents. So we've all been in different accidents, right? Whether you fall off a ladder, break your arm, or you get in a car wreck, or you're running across and you slip and trip on something, it's because we're not really mindful. And our mind is ahead of the body. So we're running, trying to get there, not looking here and step in a hole or trip over a tree root or any number of things. Or you're driving your car, then you remember somebody who insulted you and you're thinking about that, and you don't see somebody pull out from the side and boom. So almost all accidents and all injuries are really self-inflicted. Maybe not all of them, but a good majority of them, due to our unmindfulness. And that means not being grounded and centered in the present moment with that sort of alert attention. And so that's why in the 4 foundations of mindfulness, that is the initial training, because the body is the only thing we have. The body is the only thing. Our body and breathing is the only thing that's, as I already mentioned earlier, the only thing that you have with you since the time you were born until the time you die. This breathing body with its internal sensations is the only thing that basically you can kind of control. Although we can't control all the different sensations, but just the fact of it's always there, waiting for you to just remember, oh yes, sitting, breathing, standing, breathing. Just feeling the clothing, touching the skin. Those are just happening in the present moment. But especially just the breathing body. Everything else will come and go. You can't control it. Not even your best friend or mother and father, because they can come and go. So this breathing body is really the only reliable thing we have. And even though it might be full of pains, it's still there in the present moment. So this was sort of the miracle and the genius of the Buddha's teaching. And when he understood that, this breathing body was really that connection in the way to come back home to your real mind, you could say, or come back home to awareness. So these 4 foundations of mindfulness are a way of retracing our steps back inwardly to reach that subtle dimension of present moment awareness. So, so in the next few days at retreat, we're going to, continue to try working on that. And again, that's why we practice the yoga. Because in order to get centered in the body has to be a pleasing thing to feel. Because if the body is just a mass of pain or you can't feel anything, then the mind just will escape into fantasies and thoughts and worries and other distractions. And unfortunately, most people's bodies are like that because of one or other reasons. And most people's bodies are half starved of oxygen because they don't do deep, slow breathing. They don't oxygenate it enough. Or their muscles and joints are stiff from not doing the proper exercise. And the life force, which is basically electrical energy, cannot flow through all the tissues to keep the cells charged up. Our cells stay alive and charged up because of sort of, you could say, electricity passing through them, or the life force. Each cell of the body has like a positive and negative post to it. And passing the energy through that, the prana energy, is what keeps the cells charged up and alive. And when that energy is cut off, then those cells will also, be negatively affected by that. So that's why the practice of yoga is a very useful adjunct or a useful thing to practice when you're beginning the practice of meditation. Because as I mentioned before, meditation happens between the brain and the spinal column. And if the nervous system data is not reaching the brain in the right time, then the mind gets confused and the mind, makes wrong choices. Or it goes to sleep and it's not aware. So that's why, the importance of the posture and also of doing deep, slow breathing is one of the sort of quickest ways in order to get reconnected with the body, the present moment. And also connected with this, the idea that, the baby was, created, let's say in the mother's stomach, right, from a one-cell organism. And it evolved in 9 months and evolved into a human baby, which is, or human organism, which is considered to be, the most evolved that we know of as of yet, most evolved sort of organism with its brain and so on. And all that took place from natural wisdom. The doctor didn't create the baby. The IBM machine didn't create the baby, although they're trying to now. That's another story. But it was a natural wisdom that created this marvelous human organism. And it knew how to protect itself. through the immune system and through the interconnections. Every cell of the body can communicate to the rest of the body. That's why if you get a cut on your toe, messages will be sent to other parts of the body. May the red blood cells crank out some, something to stop the bleeding. Or a message will get to the brain. And they'll call other parts of the body, hey, help out. Fight off this bacteria. Numb the pain, like you get in an accident and shock will kind of help deaden the pain. All that is the body's defenses. And it all happened by itself, through natural wisdom. But now what happens? We're being disconnected from the body. Now something happens, you have to go to a doctor. Hey, doc, what's wrong with me? Give me this, give me that. Some of that may help, some of it may not. But the fact is, that we've lost that natural ability for the body to heal itself or to maintain in a good state of being because of consuming impure substances. And because of that, having lost the connection to the present moment, we're trying to bring, because of desire and the desire for pleasurable feeling or sweets or other nice tastes or this or that, and then people creating all these artificial flavors that tantalize your taste buds and, all that, which contain, harmful products. We've, unfortunately, consumed all that. And now we're having to pay the price with so many types of diseases and other things. But it was because we've lost that natural connection to the present moment and also the natural wisdom. Like, for example, when you were young, I talk from my own experience. When you first started, young teenager, maybe start smoking. So you might steal some cigarettes from your parents, their purse or their drawer or something. You saw them hiding something somewhere and you found a cigarette and started to smoke because the other kids on the block were smoking. Be a tough guy. And so, we might have innocently started smoking. And then, those habits pick up easily. Then after some time, we start. So what's that telling you? That smoking may not be so good for you, right? But then a person, they light up and the body's trying to tell them, hey, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. But the mind says, shut up. You see? So the mind overrides our body. The mind has become overly dependent on its source of happiness by these external and artificial types of stimulations. Simply because we've lost the ultimate contentment, that connection with the ultimate happiness vibration, which is that of present moment awareness. The natural life force that's deep underneath. So I'm just, saying all these different things just to give a kind of a context in which, the practice of meditation and what kind of forces that we're dealing with when we're, trying to develop the meditation. Why meditation is so difficult for most people. Like how many people this morning got disturbed by those hindrances I mentioned? sleepiness, couldn't stay alert and awake, or pains, being disturbed by pains. But more importantly, even lost in your thoughts. How many of you got lost in your thoughts this morning? I saw 2 hands come up. Any more? How many could count their breaths to 10 without getting lost? How many people couldn't make it to 3 before their mind got lost in thoughts? Okay, well, anyway. So you can see that, the meditation is not it should be the most easiest thing in the world, but because of, our conditioning, we've made it so difficult. Anyway, so I'm want to stop this talk now, or bring it to a close, and see if there's any questions of anybody out there that's either listening in on Zoom or here, for those who are staying here in the retreat. And if you have any questions based on that discussion, or anything that comes up from meditation, you can write them down for our questions and answer session this evening. But let's see if there's anybody out there. Can you see if there's any hands that have come up? Or if anybody out there listening in on Zoom wants to ask a question. Write it down in chat. Or if anybody wants to ask a question right now before it might slip your mind, you can, if it's based on something I mentioned in the talk. Okay.
Could you describe in more detail how one experiences living in awareness at every moment? How does it feel like? What is it?
Well, can you repeat the question? The question was, how can a person experience living in the present moment all the time? Don't. Try 1% of the time. Try living with awareness for the 1 in and out breath. If you can be aware of 1 in and out breath, try for 2 in and out breaths. If you can remain aware for 2 in and out breaths, try for 3, for 4, for 10, for 100, for 1,000. So it has to be developed gradually for the most part. Or just remembering that you're sitting. And so no one's going to have perfect present moment awareness except for an arahant. So we have to start where we are, and it starts by learning how to focus on the breathing or the posture. And the key is noting when something is blocking that, because awareness is already there underneath, but it's been layered and layered and covered over with so many layers of defilements, hindrances. And so it's not a matter of creating awareness, it's a matter of deflecting the objects that are masking over or blocking that awareness from being directly experienced. Like the sleepiness, if you lose that awareness, then that is what's blocking that, or some other thoughts. So don't think you have to learn how to have perfect mindfulness in a way. You're not going to. That is not right away. It's something that it takes years and years and years or lifetimes of practice to perfect it. But it starts with the first step. You have to take the first step. Yes.
I have a question. Do you think it will be more difficult to live in awareness throughout the day compare when you just sit in meditation? I think it will be more difficult for me because when you engage with other people, so and in addition to our condition for waking, to be aware of the mind.
But that's why we have retreats. That's why we practice daily meditation. It's a training ground.
So start with just
If you can't be mindful of yourself sitting in a quiet place without distractions, there's no way you're going to be able to maintain that in the midst of distractions. So that's why it's not good to meditate in a perfectly quiet place and having everything perfect the way you want it, because then the you is there trying to control things. So again, the middle path. And so like these formal meditation periods, or where we try to minimize distractions, but there's always going to be something arise, because a pain is a distraction. So we train ourselves, in these formal periods of meditation. But that's why we practice walking meditation too. If you just think meditation is something when you're sitting, it's going to be very limited. So you've got to take that awareness from having been seated for a while, you have to take that up into standing. And standing is the transition from inactivity to activity. So it's important to standing. A lot of people, they just jump up and start rushing. They don't stand. Middle path. Standing is the middle path between idleness and too much activity. So you stand up, don't be in a rush, feel the standing body, and then mindfully start, walking. And so once you ingrain that habit in you, then you can start. It's like training wheels on a bicycle. A young child, when his legs are weak, you can't expect it to get on just a two-wheeled normal kind of bike and be able to have a balance and ride. You got to put training wheels on it, isn't it? And so the training wheels are like meditating and, agreeable surroundings and so on, and in a limited environment. But then as you start to dodge the bullets within your own body and mind, and you can relax around that pain coming up here, or pain coming up there, or you can not react to that sound on this side, the sound on that side, or react to your own thoughts in your mind. Once you be able to do that within yourself, then when you get out and encounter the outside world, you'll be in a better position to do that.
But then we have to continue to practice, not just by sitting, but to
That's why I said walk.
No,
Practice walking. Well, we'll talk about that later. Don't jump ahead of yourself. We got 5 days. That's why we're practicing here. By that time, we talk about being a better idea. That's doable. Yeah, I could do that. But at this point, you don't know, because the mind is still confused. So any questions come up from the outside? Okay, so I think maybe we'll stop with that. And so now you've been focusing outside and maybe got excited from that all that, and so just close the eyes. Don't move. Don't stay exactly where you are. Just stay. Just take a deep, slow breath. Really expand the lungs. Hold the air in your lungs as long as you comfortably can. Just feel that vibration. And slowly let out the breath. Okay, now slowly stand up. Stretch your legs out and stand up. If you rush to stand up, that means the mind is thinking about the future. That's why you should always have the pauses in between your various activities, changes of postures. If you need to use the restroom, then go ahead and mindfully do that. And come back. We're still on the Zoom. Okay, friends, so we're going to conclude the Zoom broadcast now. Try to do some meditation on your own, having heard that talk while it's still fresh in your mind. Find a place to meditate there at home. And we'll see you back tomorrow morning.